to give them this truth, now they say I preach. I'm trying to give them this word, now they say I preach. I open up my book, now they say I preach it. They don't want to come around because they always say I preach. I'm trying to give them this truth, is what I'm trying to do. Man, I'm trying to save your soul, is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to open your eyes to what I'm trying to do. 144,000, don't you want to be counted too? Hey, Shock will take these Hebrews to another level.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Abshai of Israeliteway and another Sharp Your Sword lesson presentation study. And this one is entitled Marriage License, Crime Against Humanity and the Truth About Biblical Marriage. So we're going to look deeply into this topic and see what the Bible has to say about these practices. In this lesson presentation study, I'll be using the Creator's name, which is Yahuwah, and the Messiah's name, Yahushua. In this lesson presentation study, I'll be reading from the translation called the Scriptures, and we don't put any scriptures above other translations. The main important thing is to have understanding. Marriage license, crime against humanity, the truth about biblical marriage. Well, a lot of people in society feels that, or their understanding is that if you don't have a marriage license, you're not married. And if you're living without a marriage license, then you're living in fornication. That's what we were taught through different religious organizations and different upbringings. But marriage license, is marriage license recorded in the Bible? Can we find in the Bible where anyone receive a marriage license, to prove that they were married? We don't see that anywhere in Scripture. So what is biblical marriage, right? We're going to find out through this study what exactly is marriage according to the Bible. A lot of people will listen to this lesson, and even though we present many facts, they'll still want to stick to what they've been taught by the system, that you need a marriage license to prove that you are married. So we're going to look at what the Scripture says about it, and marriage license, where did that came from, when was it introduced into society, and we're going to understand that marriage is a covenant between two parties, male and female, that is considered a marriage according to the Bible. A license is like a contract, and we're going to see what that contract involves. So this study is just another revealing of Yahuwah's truths, intended to bring his people out of false religion to come full circle back to him and his ways at the end of the age. Remember that his ways are higher than our ways and beyond our understanding. His truth is in his word, and his word is settled in the heavens. Nevertheless, Yahuwah requires that we bear witness of his word, his ways, and his truth. So do not let previous learned Christian doctrines keep you from discovering more and more of Yahuwah's ways and Yahuwah's point of view on this subject. So we see here George Washington, the so-called founding father of the United States, was married without a marriage license. He was married without a marriage license. And he was married, right? So a marriage license, you don't need a marriage license to make your marriage valid, right? As long as you make a covenant, both of you make a covenant with the Most High in the midst, that marriage is recognized by the Most High, right? The marriage license was introduced to transfer jurisdiction. To transfer jurisdiction, so you can have some privilege where you transfer your rights over to the states or the province, so you could receive some benefits from that system. And that's why the law of the land, there's no law that states that if you're married and do not have a marriage license, you're committing a crime, right? And there's nothing in the Bible, no law in the Bible also, that says if you're married without a marriage license, you're committing a transgression, right? There's no such law. The law of the land is that you cannot have two marriage licenses. Okay? That's what the law states. If you have two marriage licenses, then you can be arrested, right? But if you're married without the marriage license, there's no law where they can come and arrest you, right, or charge you for some kind of felony. There's no such law, right, of the land. Yeah. What the system has done too, they have used the churches, right, to influence people to get married, because the church will claim that if you live together, you know, as a married couple and you do not have a marriage license, you're living in fornication, right? And does not, you don't find that anywhere in scriptures, right? Where two people are married and because they don't have a marriage license, they're living in sin. There's no such scripture in the Bible. So how did we come to this place where marriage licenses are issued? Historically, all the states in America had laws outlawing the marriage of blacks and whites. In the mid-1800s, certain states began allowing interracial marriages or miscegenation as long as those marrying receive a license from the states. So originally, the only people that was allowed to, was forced to get a marriage license are those involved in interracial marriages. Were the only ones who were forced to get a marriage license. There was a law where you have to get a marriage license if you want to intermarry. So in other words, they had to receive permission to do an act which without such permission would have been illegal. The reason any license throughout history has been instituted was so that it could be denied to some people. So that was the reason for a license, where if you go to in front of the government and say, I want to get married to this person, right, the government still say, no, you cannot marry them, right? You cannot get a license, right? So if two couples living together all their lives and they have committed themselves to each other and they have made a covenant between each other, and if they go to the states or the province and say, we want to get a license, the states or the province can say, no, we're not going to give you a license. Right? So that means what the marriage license have done, it has transferred jurisdiction from the Most High Yah, and it has given it over to the state or the province. Right? That's what a marriage license, the purpose of a marriage license, and why the system designed it. So they could have all power and jurisdiction over your union. So in the mid-1800s, this happened to be interracial couples. Then in 1923, the Uniform Marriage and Marriage License Act was passed by the federal government. 6 years later, marriage licenses were being distributed in every state to all people, not just interracial couples. Marriage had become a government institution, right? And it's a marriage license act. It's not a marriage license law, right? There's a difference between an act and a law. So they found that this thing was beneficial to the government, and they were making money, and it was very lucrative for them, so they decided to introduce it and make it a government institution. So Black Law's Dictionary points to this historical fact that when it defines marriage license as a license or permission granted by public authority to persons who intended to intermarry. Intermarry is defined in Black's Law Dictionary as miscegenation, mixed or interracial marriages. So it is unacceptable that the state or province has the audacity to sanction marriage, hereby granting permission. Marriage license documents conferring the state's blessing on a marital union have no biblical basis. There is no scripture mandating such authorization for marriage, nor any scripture states that this union can only be official with a piece of paper from the local magistrate. So, by this lesson, presenting it. I know many people will probably say I'm twisting scriptures, and I'm teaching falsehood. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people also understand, right, what the scriptures teach regarding to marriage and how the system, the trickery that the system has used in order to use us to make money from this marriage license that they've introduced into society. I'm going to play a couple of videos now to hear what a few people has to say in regards to this marriage license.
I thought I'd go ahead and spend some time trying to bring a little bit of education, because I have a lot of people that are asking me questions. And I'm going to go ahead and do this, pinned in my last video. Listen, never get a marriage license. Never get a marriage license. Now, it's totally up to you. It's your prerogative. It's your choice if you want to get a marriage license. I mean, after all, anytime the government gives you license or grants you privileges for something that's already a right for you to do in the first place, they've got perks. They got benefits for it. You get to claim them as dependents. But I will tell you that the marriage contract has been one of the most expensive contracts that lawyers and court systems has used against the man. You don't have to have a state marriage license in order to be married. George Washington didn't have it. All right, are you listening to me? Marriage license came into being, and most of you don't know because you've been dumped down to an unprecedented level, believing this paradigm. Everything that this country sells you and everything that they tell you, you believe it, and you don't check out anything, and you assume that just because you put mental assent to it, that you're right, but you're wrong. Marriage license came into play at the close of the 20th century, somewhere along in there, the early 1900s, because of miscegenation laws. In other words, they didn't want whites and blacks being married. Now, if they were going to let coloreds and whites, that's what they was calling them back then, be married, they was going to regulate it. And that regulation gave the government control over the fruit of that union. That's the sole purpose of marriage license. You don't believe me? I dare you go check it out. You think as a parent that those children are yours, but as soon as you get a marriage license and then you go to the hospital and sign a birth certificate, then you get a Social Security number on top of that, you all but finished. That's why when the DHS come knocking at your door, or when they go to your public school system and take your children and shoot them up with it, snake venom and monkey pus, and do whatever they want, you may get upset, but you better not say a word, because remember, ignorance of the law is no excuse. You opted into this. They didn't disclose the terms and agreement to you when you signed that marriage license. There is a big old law right behind that little certificate that you get. And you are nothing more than a babysitter to your children. Now, you can get mad, you can get upset, all you want, but I dare you to go check me out. See what it says, see what I say. Check me out, see if what I'm saying is so. Because you'll be a whole lot better off if you got married and got a family Bible and signed it. Do like the rich people do, draw up a contract, or what's called a prenuptial agreement. Hold each other to the fire, because today people's word don't mean nothing. You can see that today. People's word don't mean nothing, and people just simply not going to do what the scriptures say. But if you want to protect yourself, never get a marriage license. And if a woman says that she's not going to marry you, or she's not going to marry you until you get a license, then guess what? You know that's not the woman for you. That's the truth. Shalom.
I have a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. Now this is Black's Law 3rd edition. This is about 1870s, I think, somewhere in that time frame. And so it's an old book, and I've gotten a copy of it, and I've looked up marriage license. And it says, quote, a license or permission granted by public authority to persons who intend to intermarry. Right there in black and white. A marriage license is for mixed marriages. Well, eventually that was working so well that we just apply a marriage license to everybody. Why do you need permission? If you go to a wedding, how many people are in that contract? Well, you got the man, you got the woman, but that's not all. You've also got the state. The state is there giving you permission. Why? Because you asked. If you ask for permission, that's pretty good evidence that you needed permission. Why would you ask for permission if you don't need it? So you've got the man, the woman, and the state. There are 3 entities in this contract. So now the state has a vested interest in the outcome of this contract.
A marriage license. This is found in Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition. Marriage license is a license or permission granted by public authority to persons who intend to intermarry. You know, the thing is, in the law, is words are absolutely critical. And so we have to look at these words that are being used and start understanding what these words mean. And so the critical words in this case are license, persons, and intermarry. And so then if we go to intermarriage, and that's in Black's Law Dictionary 5th edition as well, we go see miscegenation. And miscegenation is a mixture of races, marriage between persons of different races. And so the important things to understand is license, persons, intermarriage, and those are basically the 3 things. There are 3 parties. This is, we'll look into some court cases here. This is North Carolina, 1945. There are 3 parties to a marriage contract: the husband, the wife, and the state. Did you know the state is involved in your marriage? For this reason, marriage is denominated a status. And that's an interesting terminology. That status comes from Roman civil law. And so they're imposing Roman civil law on you. And you need to understand that. And so anyways, for this reason, marriage is denominated a status, and certain incidents are attached thereto by law, which may not be abrogated without the consent of the 3rd party, the state. So we're talking some Roman civil law here, but Roman civil law is everywhere. Negotiable instruments are Roman civil law. Mortgages are Roman civil law. It's absolutely everywhere in America, and it's all by consent. Anyways, here's another, this is a case called Castle versus Castle. Gee, that sounds like a divorce case. Marriage is a civil contract to which there are 3 parties: the husband, the wife, and the state. And this is another one, 1931, Potter versus Potter. Gee, that sounds like another divorce case. The state is a party of interest in every marriage contract. This is a 1950 court case. The legislature, in dealing with the subject of marriage, has plenary power, as marriage differs from ordinary common law contracts and is subject to control and regulation by the state. Plenary power, that's military dictatorship. Civil rights. This is a 1905 case. Civil rights under the 14th Amendment are for federal citizens and not state citizens. Federal citizens, as parents, have no right to the custody of their infant children except subject to the paramount right of the state. And so, again, this is talking about children, and about this is how Child Protective Services gets up in your face, and it all is linked to the marriage license, because if don't have a marriage license, then that makes it increasingly difficult for them to proceed against you. And you need to start understanding the implications of these things. These bureaucrats hand us this stuff, and we just go ahead and do it, and then we're wondering why CPS is coming and stealing our children in the middle of the night.
So now we see many people are waking up to the knowledge and understanding of what the marriage license is all about. You also have some people that are also have also divorced themselves out of the Marriage License Act, and we see gays and lesbians seeking to obtain a marriage license. And the reason why they're doing that, because there is some benefits of having a marriage license, and that's what they seek, is those benefits. But a gay and lesbian couple are not married. It's impossible for same-sex couples to be married. It's not recognized by the Most High Yah. Maybe the system may recognize it, because people in their understanding is that marriage is a marriage license. But under the covenant of the Most High, right? A marriage covenant is an agreement that's made between a man and a woman with the Most High in the midst. And the Most High do not recognize same-sex couple marriage. But the system do, because of that marriage license. When it comes to marriage in Babylon, there are procedures and standards for marriage that one must follow. And which one of those procedures is to require a marriage license? Many people go about following the steps outlined for marriage according to the state or province without ever knowing the reasoning or history or legal aspect of what they are doing. The word license is derived from the Latin word licentious, which means lacking restraint, ignoring societal standards, disregard for accepted rules. Not long after these licenses were issued, some states began requiring all people who married to obtain a marriage license, seeing that they could make a profit of the union of marriage. Miscegenation laws. Miscegenation laws were laws that banned interracial marriage and sometimes interracial sex between whites and blacks. In the United States, interracial marriage, cohabitation, and sex have since 1863 been termed as miscegenation. In North America, laws against interracial marriage and interracial sex existed and were enforced in the 13 colonies from the late 17th century onwards, and subsequently in several United States and U.S. territories until 1967. In the United States, miscegenation laws were state laws passed by individual states to prohibit miscegenation, nowadays more commonly referred to as interracial marriage and interracial sex. Typically defining miscegenation as a felony, and these laws prohibit the solemnization of weddings between persons of different races and prohibit the officiating of such ceremonies. Fornication. This is a word we're all too familiar with, and the understanding that we had in regards to fornication is anyone who engage in sexual relations without a marriage covenant, or anyone who do not have a marriage license, we would consider them to be fornicators. But the word fornication is nowhere found in the original manuscripts. It's not in the original manuscripts, because anyone who engaged in any sexual relations without a marriage covenant was considered to be adulterers, right? Adultery is anyone who had sexual relations without a marriage covenant, right? Will be considered to be adulterer. So the word fornication is a word in the year of 1303, was defined as a sexual act committed with a prostitute. The Latin word fornix, from the which fornicatio, the ancestors of fornication, is derived, meant a vault, an ark. It was referred to a vault, cellar, or a similar place where prostitutes plied their trade. Does make it in reference to a sexual act committed with a prostitute, in which the Bible refers to as a harlot, in which a harlot is a woman who engages in sexual intercourse for money. So upon the states knowing that blacks and whites will still be tempted to marry, instead of sticking them with just a felony charge, they redefine the definition of fornication and begin using it when blacks and whites desire to marry one another or have sex with each other, thus therefore making a lawful act linked with a lawful biblical act, therefore bringing condemnation upon two people coming together as a sin and illegal. So even if the black and white couple is married, they will still call them fornicators, right? Fornicators, because they want to link them and associate them with prostitution, right? So if a black couple and a white couple is lawfully married, they'll still call them fornicators because they see them as prostitutes, right? That's how they view them as. So with the majority of states being racist states and being owners of slaves, this word fornication was then instituted by scholars into the Holy Bible, thus giving it the meaning or definition as a sexual act when occurring outside of a marriage, such as any person who had sex without being married by the church. This racist idiotic doctrine was brought into practice, and with the new definition of the word fornication being instituted, it now gave the states a cover to continue racism by bringing those of different races into the court to be tried for committing a felony act of fornication, thus labeling them as fornicators. So what they're doing, they're charging them for prostitution. So fornication means prostitutions. That's what they're actually telling you, that fornication is prostitution. So in 1923, the federal government established the Uniform Marriage and Marriage License Act. By 1929, every state in the Union had adopted marriage license laws, and by 1935, all states required licenses except Maryland, which soon followed shortly after. So therefore, the question that people need to ask themselves is, why would it be illegal to marry without the state province permission? This question is rarely brought up or addressed because people have grown so accustomed to following the laws and statutes and commandments of man rather than those of the Most High. Right? Because many people cannot wrap their head around and the understanding of someone being married and don't have a marriage license. They cannot see the person being married unless they have a marriage license. That's what the system has done to our mind. They have really damaged us, to the point where we cannot see clearly, right? We're just under this deception and under this strong delusion that we can't see how somebody could be married without a marriage license. Right? Because we've been, in repetition, we've been taught this for so long, right? By the system and also by the churches, where that if you are married without a marriage license, you're living in fornication. So when you marry with a marriage license, your marriage is a creature of the state. It is a corporation of the states. Therefore, they have jurisdiction over your marriage, including the fruit of your marriage, in which the fruit of your marriage is your children and every piece of property you own. So when you marry with a marriage license, you are not just marrying your spouse, but you are also marrying the state and province. With this ring, ID wed is of the state province and is found in most courthouses and in many cities. That phrase was established by the State Bar Association. They don't tell you that when you repeat your vows, you enter into a legal contract in which there are three parties to that contract, with the first person being you, the second being the person you are marrying, and the third being the state's province you marry in. So it's a three-party agreement when you marry with a marriage license. See, the state and the lawyers know that when you marry with a marriage license, you are not just marrying your spouse, you are marrying the state, thus giving undue jurisdiction over the state. The marriage license invades and removes the Most High given parental authority. When you read the scripture, you see that the Most High intended for children to have their father's blessing regarding whom they marry. Daughters were to be given in marriage by their fathers, according to Deuteronomy 22 verse 16, Exodus 22 verse 17, and 1 Corinthians 7 verse 38. Man knows what the word of the Most High says to be, incorporates a little of it into his own agenda and personal desire to give his method of marriage some credibility. It is a known fact that there is no requirement to obtain a marriage license in colonial America, nor in the Bible. When you read the laws of the colonies and then the states, you see only two requirements for marriage, with the first being that you had to obtain your parents' permission to marry, and second, you had to post public notice of the marriage 5 to 15 days before the ceremony. You don't find anywhere in the scriptures where a man ever decided to take a wife and had to go buy an engagement ring or wedding ring, nor will you find where a man had to acquire a marriage license, nor will you find where a man had to go before a preacher or a county clerk or a sheriff or a county judge just to be married. This pagan doctrine was instituted by man to replace the parental right of the father with the philosophy of man. To further cement this doctrine of acquiring a license to marry, the Roman Catholic Church set up seminary schools to also indoctrinate and empower those who desired to become preachers, the authority and permission to act as divine authority figures in regards to marriage. When the government needed finances, some states began allowing interracial marriages or miscegenation as long as those marrying receive a license from the state. What the people fail to realize with these procedures for a marriage given by the government interstate is that when you marry with a marriage license, you grant state, province jurisdiction over your marriage. Most preachers who are under seminary delusion have no idea that when they are marrying someone with a marriage license, they act as an agent of the state rather than a man of the Most High. Why? Because they would have to sign the marriage license and would have to mail it into the state, in which doing this is given the state's demand to observe the place of the Most High and family regarding marriage, thus instituting into union of the marriage created by the Most High. Is unbiblical and immoral laws to govern marriage. Therefore, the preacher is really committing treason against the Most High by acting as an agent representing the laws and commands of the state. A marriage license is a three-party contract between man and woman and the state known as an adhesion contract. An adhesion contract is one which is extremely one-sided, grossly favoring the state. When a couple applies for a license from the state to marry, they are actually asking for permission to engage in the unlawful activity of marriage. Why? Because the state can regulate that which it licensed by entering into a state-sanctioned franchise as a married couple. A couple forfeits their rights to a private, sovereign marriage and any ownership control of their children or property as a result of the marriage license. Child Protective Services receives full power and authority to seize children via the marriage license under the ancient legal doctrine of parent patria. When a state-licensed married couple has a child, the birth certificate is a document the state uses to claim ownership of the child under its marriage contract. State ownership remains as long as that child lives, even after the age of 21. The license is then converted into a certificate after the marriage takes place. Barron's Banking Dictionary defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. One of the main reasons the marriage certificate changed its character was the fact that the Panic of 1907 had just taken place and Senator Nelson Aldrich had been appointed to head the National Monetary Commission to ensure such panics never took place again. Senator Aldrich's plan was ultimately realized in the Federal Reserve System of debt-based money that Americans suffer under today. Because the money system proposed was debt-based, the state and federal government needed to have certificated property that produced wealth that they could pledge as collateral for notes in the upcoming debt money system. In 1903, only a few states had adopted a marriage license scheme. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, and automobile certificates of title are just some of the commercial paper the state or provincial government use to collateralize their debt to the banks for all of the bond issues the people vote for. These certificates are serial numbered so the banks can more easily track them and all conform to the rules of negotiable instrument as outlined in the Universal Commercial Code. You and your family have, in effect, been pledged as chattel to the banks for the states and federal government debts. We are the one who unknowingly gave Child Protective Services permission to steal our children, since the state can regulate that with its license. Child Protective Services has blossomed into a money-making machine by snatching kids and receiving millions of federal dollars for them. In most cases, Child Protective Services has no interest in reuniting families because by keeping the family unit off balance, under constant worry and financial drain, the people of a state are more easily controlled, taxed, herded like sheep by the governmental power. A state which has strong, responsible families and good morals and understanding of right and wrong, and a time to focus on the solutions to state abuses, will never be able to get away with the massive confiscatory taxation and licensing schemes the government as well as all states enjoy perpetrating against its citizens today. Child Protective Services receive its authority to kidnap children from the child's parent the moment a marriage license was applied for and granted. The child is placed in a guardian ward relationship with the state where the parents function merely as custodians. That custodial relationship may be terminated by the authorizing state agency whenever it declares the child is not being raised according to the standard established by the state or the province. Therefore, the states can sue the parents on behalf of the child based on the state or province rule of civil procedures. An executor, administrator, guardian, bailee, trustee of an express trust, a party with whom or in whose name a contract has been made for the benefit of another, or a party authorized by statute may sue in that person's own name without joining the party for whose benefit the action is brought. So, therefore, the state can sue on behalf of the child without using the child's name because you, the parents, gave the state guardianship over your child with the marriage license, making the state a trustee of an express trust. The government is against everything the Most High stands for, so your trust and hope must be in the Most High and His laws, statutes, and commandments rather than in some governmental body. Therefore, when the standards and procedures of Babylon are not in compliance with those of the Most High, then as followers of the Most High, this is what you must do. According to Acts 5 verse 29 says, and Kepha and the other emissaries answered and said, we have to obey Elohim rather than man. So we must obey the Most High Yah rather than man. So we see here a marriage license is a covenant between a man, male, and a woman, female, according to the highest of all authorities. And this has not changed. No one has the authority to change what a marriage is, right? It's based on a covenant between a man and a woman. And this was how it was from the beginning. If you go all the way back from the beginning of time, from Adam and Eve, it was all based on a covenant. As we look at Genesis 2 verse 21, it says, so Yahuwah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall on a man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Verse 22, and the rib which Yahuwah Elohim had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. Verse 23, and the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one is called woman because she was taken out of man. So this was a covenant that was done between Adam and Eve. He became his wife, flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone. Right? That was a covenant in the making, in the beginning of time. And we see Genesis 2 verse 24 says, for this caused a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So when they become one flesh, that means they're under the same principles. Under the same principles in purpose, goal, and a character. Purpose, goal, and character, that one flesh. That's what the one flesh means. The 3 C's of the Israelite marriage. Traditionally, the Israelites' marriage, involved 3 stages, and covenant, consummation, and a celebration. And Israelite marriages never involve a wedding ceremony like we see today with the bride walking down the aisle to be married in the church. That's how it was for us as Israelites traditionally. So the first stage was covenant, and an offer of marriage is proposed with a legally binding document whose primary purpose was to protect the bride. The father of the bride would use his wisdom to look out of the best interest of his daughter. Consummation, stage 2. When the father consented to the groom, he was allowed to come to the home of the bride and consummate the marriage once the agreement was signed. The couple did not have sex until the groom fulfilled his financial obligations to the father of the bride. That's the second stage. The third stage now is the wedding celebration at the groom's home. So the consummation came before the feast, right? As opposed to how it's done in modern times. So the 3 stages exist in today's modern marriages. However, the order and timing of each stages is different. So first, there's a contract. Is a sign for marriage license with the province or the state if you're in the U.S. B, the wedding feast and the reception, and then you have the consummation that happens in the bridal suite that night in a hotel room. That's when you go on your honeymoon. So it still consists of the 3 C's, but just the order is just not, just the order is switched around a little bit. Yeah. But traditionally, that's how, as Israelites, we did it. We did the covenant, the consummation, and then the celebration. That's how it was done as Israelites. So I'm going to play a couple more videos because, many people are waking up and they're realizing that the marriage license is not biblical, and it's something that the system designed or to control and to have jurisdiction over your marriage. So I'm going to play a couple of videos now from a couple of brothers going to give their wisdom on what a marriage license is all about.
Hello, this is Reginald, also known as Brother Teacher. I just wanted to give you a snippet on the subject of marriage. There are those who traditionally over the years, and probably as long as we can think back on in American history at least, we have gone through the traditions and ceremonies of marriage in America, and we fill out paperwork or forms or marriage licenses and certificates of marriage. I just want to let you know that marriage does not require paperwork. Marriage simply is the union, first mentally, of 2 people. 2 people who have mutually the same feeling for one another and decide that they want to spend, hopefully, the rest of their lives together. It does not need or warrant permission from a government, from a municipality, a local group, or an entourage, or whomever, for approval. You don't need approval. It's between you and the other person, and that is biblically substantiated. So why the piece of paper? It is really funny to me, or strange, I should say, how we have to pay to get married. Someone, the justice of the peace, the preacher, the pastor, whomever, and then if we decide that we don't want to be with that person any longer, we have to pay to part. So someone is being fed financially. Is that the way it was intended to be? I don't think so. If I am out and I'm married, let's say I'm married, and I went the traditional way as we know of in America, and I have a marriage license. But I don't carry that marriage license everywhere I go. I don't think anyone does. You might have the symbol on your finger in the way of a wedding band or a marriage ring, if you will, wedding ring, but you don't carry your license. And if you're out in public, peradventure someone asks you, are you married? You don't run to your car or look in your purse or your wallet or your pocket and pull out a piece of paper and say, here, I am. Here's proof that I am. You know why? You know you're married, and your partner knows that you're married. You don't need a piece of paper to prove that you're married. But because the powers that be want to make money from you and I and everyone else that go that traditional route, and even when you part again, they're going to make money from you also.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube citizens. Hey, I got to share this with you guys. I was just talking to a buddy of mine that I went to school with this past 2 years, and we were talking about he's about to get married, and I remember we were talking about when at the time I was telling him, oh yeah, get married. He was living with his girlfriend, and I told him he should get married, don't be shacking up and everything. And so all of a sudden, he's been hearing about my YouTube and kind of seeing some stuff on YouTube and Facebook. But anyway, I told him, hey bro, learn from my lesson. I'm spending millions of dollars of information I'm giving to you, and I'm just going to give it to you because I love you, brother. Do not get a marriage license. I said, go through the whole thing, go through the wedding, go through everything. She's already your wife. If you want to have a nice little ceremony just to celebrate that she's your wife, go ahead, but do not get that marriage license. Getting a marriage license is like this. It's like, for example, when I used to play for the Packers, I had a great coach. I mean, I wouldn't have broken Reggie White's record if it wasn't for this man, Coach Jethro Franklin. He was my pro coach my first 4 or 5 years in the league. And he used to have a saying. He used to tell me, I'm going to make you do things that you don't want to do, so that you can go to places that you always wanted to go. Well, guess where I ended up? I ended up in the Packers Hall of Fame. I'm in the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame. I was a small defensive end. I ended up breaking Reggie White's record. Reggie White was 6'6" or 6'5", 300 and something pounds. I'm 6'4", 245 pounds on a good day. And I ended up breaking the record when everyone thought that I wouldn't even be able to make it in the league. And I ended up playing 9 years in the league. And my coach used to tell me, I'm going to make you do things that you don't want to do so you can go to places that you always wanted to go. And you know something? He rode, I'm talking about he rode me. I mean, hard. I got chewed out so bad, everybody in the whole practice field knew I was getting chewed out by coach. Everybody said, Kabir, what are you doing? What's causing the coach to be chewing you out? What did you do now? I mean, I'm talking about he was riding me hard. And I hated it. But I loved it because he did make me do things I didn't want to do. Well, husband, how can you make your wife holy? How can you sanctify her if you don't have what it takes to be able to push her and make her do things that she doesn't want to do so she can be sanctified, holy, and set apart? That's what a husband is called to do according to Ephesians chapter 5. Love your wife like Christ loved the church. Well, when you have a marriage license, can you imagine if they added one thing to my contract that I could determine the pay of my position coach on how I feel, just on how I feel. I could determine his pay year in and year out. Do you think he would have pushed me? Do you think he would have been what I thought he was, a jerk? But the very thing that he did was the very thing that made me all that I always wanted to be, that I couldn't have done it without him. I couldn't have done it without him riding me the way he was riding me. And when you get a marriage license, that's exactly what you're doing. The wife now determines your pay. She can destroy you. She can destroy your family when she gets emotional. And the devil comes in and starts spinning her ears and telling her what she's missing out on. And then all of a sudden, you're just trying to make her holy, trying to love on her like Christ loved the church. And then she just goes buck wild. And because you gave your strength to a woman, and the Bible talks about in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 3, don't give your strength to a woman. Getting a marriage license gives your strength away. So I just want to warn you, warning, I'm talking to all men. If you are a breadwinner, do not give your wife, do not get a marriage license. I repeat, do not get a marriage license. It sucks, man. Once you get that, you are locked and loaded unless you're ready to lose it all. And that's what you're going to end up doing, is losing it all, not just money. I'm talking about you're going to lose your children. You're going to lose it all. So don't make the devil job easy. Getting a marriage license makes it easy to break up homes. If I didn't have a marriage license and me and my wife just lived together and I treated her just like I would as a wife, my family will still be intact. But because my wife had the power, just basically like a kid, just destroying everything and can't even control herself. So anyway, I just want to encourage you, do not get a marriage license. Learn from my mistake. I can write a book about this stuff and make lots of money off of this stuff. I can do seminars and help people, and I'm giving it away right here on my YouTube channel. Just subscribe. But other than that, guys, take heed to what I'm saying. Don't get a marriage license. I warn you. I'm a former athlete. Any athlete, please do not. Forgive me for all the guys I told to get it, but this is better than a prenuptial agreement. Just don't get a marriage license, and you will be good to go. Shalom, shalom.
Can I record my marriage in public record without a marriage license? So this is what may concern a number of people when they make a covenant, because they want to make sure there's some kind of security just in case, things go sideways down the road. So they want to make sure that they're well protected. Yes, you can do that, as long as you don't involve the marriage license. You can, do certain things to have yourself protected and have it recorded in the public records. So one thing you can do also is have a marriage ceremony with a facilitator and without a marriage license, because some people want to have something nice, and you can make up your own vows, rent a hall and have a signing book, and you can recite your vows to each other in front of your guests. And you can make up a marriage certificate and sign it together with at least 2 witnesses. And you can make an affidavit and attach a copy of the affidavit and the signing list and the book, and record everything as a package, right, in the municipality records. And now you have a public record of that marriage. So this is an option. It's not something that you have to do. If you feel uncomfortable just having just a covenant, but it's highly encouraged that anything that you do today, you have to do it in writing. If you make a covenant, make sure you have that covenant in writing. If you want to go do a ceremony, you could also proceed and do a ceremony and have somebody facilitate the wedding ceremony. You exchange your vows and have your guests and all that stuff. You can still have that when you make your marriage covenant. The wedding ring. We're going to go over a few facts in regards to the wedding ring. And myself personally, I always wonder, why does the engagement ring cost more than the wedding ring? Because the wedding is not supposed to be the most important part of the union. So why is the engagement ring cost more than the wedding ring? And there has to be someone that's promoting this or introduce this in order for economic reason, right? Because somebody wants to profit. When we in this capitalistic system that we're in, capitalize being I'm going to capitalize, on your situation. So that's why the engagement ring was introduced, in order for somebody to capitalize financially. So we're going to look at this incident that happened with the engagement ring. Check this out. A man's elaborate wedding proposal flopped when he was turned down because the diamond on the ring was too small. So quite often the engagement ring put a lot of pressure on the men, because if they buy a wedding ring that is too small, the woman's going to use it to measure how much he loves her. So if it's really big, she's going to say that, oh, he loves me a lot. If so, And plus, it's also bragging rights. When she's around her girlfriends, she can flash that ring to show them and how much that ring cost, that diamond cost. It's a big ring, and the man went all out and bought us this big diamond engagement ring. So yeah, so this woman, it was all about the ring. It's not about the marriage. It was about the materialistic, bragging rights. So that's why she turned her back on this man, because she loved the ring more so than she loved the man. So the wedding ring comes from paganism. It cannot be found in the Old or New Testament. There was no practice among early believers to wear finger rings as a sign of marriage or engagement. So earlier on, people never wore it, and Israelites never wore no wedding ring neither, right? So Pope Gregory I in 860 AD decreed that as a required statement of nuptial intent, the groom-to-be had to give his intended an engagement ring. He further decreed the ring be of gold to signify financial sacrifice. So the first diamond engagement ring is the one given by King Maximilian in 1477 to Mary of Burgundy. The wedding rings can be traced to the idols and heathen cultures. It is not just the image of the idol we are commanded not to possess, but rather any part of the idol itself. Thus, to make oneself after the image of the idol is to practice idolatry. So the wedding ring is a circle which is said to mean eternal or unending. Marriages were never eternal in scriptures, but rather until death. The idea then of eternal marriages symbolized by the ring is not biblical. This meaning of the ring is false, so the ring gives a false testimony. So the wedding ring then is not representative of the true union of the bridegroom and his bride. The home of the couple is more a testimony, a witness and testimony of marriage than a wedding ring, for it is in the home the marriage is honored and sustained. The wedding ring originated in Babylon, the cradle of civilization. The most ancient ring discovered there is in the shape of the eternal serpent. The image of the serpent biting its tail to form the circle of the ring is an ancient satanic symbol. The same symbol is used by the Theosophic cult. Satan has, as the serpent, the great dragon of Revelation 12, has by this symbol joined a man and a woman under his cult. The snake swallowing its own tail represents rebirth, immortality, the round of existence, evolution, continuity, and perpetual movement of the universe. It symbolizes unity and infinity with no beginning and no end. The cycle of day and night, life and death, eternal marriage, heaven and earth, good and evil are all represented by the endless turning on itself, a symbol in both Egyptian and Greek mythology. Yahweh is not the serpent symbol of any wedding ring, nor is he the symbol of the wedding ring in any fashion. We may trace the ring not to Yahweh of the Bible, but to the accuser of the brethren. Where is there any ring that symbolizes Yahweh? Did Yahweh provide wedding rings for Adam and Eve? The pagan origin of the wedding ring raises questions about its adoption by Christians to represent the marriage union. The value of symbols is determined by their origin and meaning. From secular history, we learn that the ancient pagan Romans were probably responsible for beginning the use of engagement and wedding rings. Originally, the ring was placed on the third finger of the left hand because of a superstitious belief that a vein from this finger runs directly to the heart. Although this superstitious idea is no longer believed by most people, wedding rings are still placed on the third finger of the left hand by the majority of the wearers. The roundness of the ring is said to represent eternity and to symbolize endless love, and that the couple is forever united in the marriage bond. This is an unscriptural symbolism. As reference, we have Romans chapter 7, verses 1 to 3. So the fourth finger does not contain a special nerve to the heart. It is superstitious to believe if a person removes their wedding ring that evil will befall the marriage. Did a ring join them together, or was it Yahuwah? When a ring is made to join two people, Yahuwah is cast out and replaced by the piece of jewelry. This is exactly what has happened with the use of the wedding ring. Superstition is believed, and this is borderline witchcraft. Many claim they need to wear the ring to ward off men or women who think they are otherwise available. This is not true. The man or woman who is married will not be a flirt, will not entice lust, and will come out plainly and say, I am married. There is no need to allow a superstitious symbol to say what should be said with lips and conduct. Christian religions that originally rejected wedding rings. The Methodists followed the teaching of John Wesley that wedding rings were pagan and should not be worn. Mennonites likewise rejected the wedding ring as pagan. All early Baptists in America rejected use of the pagan wedding ring. The original Seventh-day Adventists abstained from use of the wedding ring because of its pagan origin. All the holiness movements, including the more devoted apostolic Pentecostals, rejected wedding rings as pagan. There was a time when the majority of Christians did not wear jewelry of any kind, including earrings and wedding rings, but this was to change when the pastors wanted the churches to be more world-friendly. The emphasis on personal holiness fell into the decline in the late 1800s, and from that time, wedding rings became more and more accepted. We now have a generation who now walk by sight and not by set-apart faith or set-apart belief. In his booklet, Light on the Wedding Ring, Methodist F.B. Anable writes, even in these times of looseness, a woman with no earthly adornment, emblem, or symbol, but modestly clothed, and with the grace of Yahuwah in her heart, may walk in the streets of our land unashamed, unmolested. Her long dress, sleeves, and decent shaded hosiery, plus real womanly dignity and deportment, will proclaim everywhere that she belongs only to Yahuwah and to her husband. Sinners will know a block away that she does not belong to them. This is genuine protection, more visibly than a tiny metal loop, and recommended by a power greater than all worldly symbols and customs put together. So in summary, the wedding ring has no biblical sanction or sacredness. It finds its origin in paganism. The wedding ring is an ordinance of the world. Yahweh says we are not to keep the world ordinances. The wedding ring denotes a false symbolism of unending, eternal union. Yahweh says that the marriage union is only for a time. The wedding ring has little protective permanent value. The wedding ring is not an essential part of a valid marriage. It is altogether unnecessary when the marriage partners are guided by the Bible principle of true love and purity. Some would protest, but my preacher says it is all right, or my church has promoted this practice for years. In fact, almost everyone does it. But the most important question is, what does Yahuwah say? No preacher, no church can alter Yahuwah's word. The truth is, marriage has always been the covenant bond from which a human family results, and offspring is the goal. The persons involved, the state, province, or a religious institution cannot establish a marriage, which the Creator is the one that brings together the component for which they were created. The facilitator of marriage is Yahuwah Elohim, the potter. We are the clay. What he calls a marriage is what matters. What he calls an abomination is what matters. The state or province or religious institution cannot create the covenant of marriage. It is only assumed. Yahuwah alone brings together what he does to serve his purpose. This world ignores the truth because it ignores the one who created it, because they are guided by humanism. This brings us to the end of this lesson presentation study, and the understanding is that you don't need a marriage license to prove that you are married. Marriage license, what it does, It's only give you some benefits of the system. So what you do, you're exchanging your rights for some privilege that the system has to offer. That's what the marriage license is all about. A marriage is a covenant that both of you made. A man and a woman makes an agreement to be together as a couple. That is a marriage. That's what a marriage is according to the Bible. There's no scripture in the Bible that commands us to get a marriage license. Not one scripture. So we have to understand that it's not fornication when two people live together as a married couple, because the system wants to label those who do not have a marriage license as fornicators, right? To kind of force them to accept the system way of living their lives, so that the system can have jurisdiction over their union. So that's not fornication. Fornication, as we mentioned in the study, is something that has to do with prostitution. So when somebody calls somebody a fornicator, they're actually calling them a prostitute. So that's where the origin of that word fornication, because it was not originally in the original scriptures at all. It was not there. That was something that was placed in the scriptures after they decided to make a distinction between adultery and want to label those who do not have a marriage license. So they use the term fornication. So if you understand the importance of this issue, allow Yahuwah shake off the vain traditions of man and seek the truth. May Yahuwah favor you with the belief and understanding that pertain to this truth. So I come to you in peace, so I leave you in peace with the Hebrew word of peace. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
I'm trying to give them the truth, now they say I preach.